very warm welcome. You're joining us at Hyde Park on Derana 24. Tonight we will talk about Sri Lanka and relations with one of our closest neighbors, Pakistan, to discuss the way forward, how the two countries share common interests and how we can come out of present challenges that are unique to these two countries, Sri Lanka and Pakistan, in the region, and as we face the current uncertain circumstances and situations. I've invited to our studios His Excellency Major General Muhammed Saad Khattak, the Pakistani High Commissioner in Sri Lanka. A warm welcome, High Commissioner.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. You are at times a securities expert, at times a counter-terrorism background research that you bring onto the table, at times a diplomat, and of course you have a military background too. So I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about unique situations that are both interesting to discuss in terms of Sri Lanka and Pakistan. I'd like to maybe start off this discussion with your observation of where we are heading today, because we have a lot of challenges as two nations in this region and in the face of a global pandemic.
Yes, I think Pakistan and Sri Lanka has been somehow facing similar challenges over the last couple of decades. Sri Lanka has been perpetually engaged in terrorism and counter-terrorism efforts for the last about two and a half decades. And Pakistan has also been suffering terrorism over the last 2 decades, almost 2 decades now. So I think the two countries bring together a lot of experience and hence a lot of mutual interaction between the leadership of the two countries, between the institutions of the two countries. So when it comes to the challenges and when it comes to facing those challenges, we somehow join hands in strategizing our efforts to overcome those challenges. And let me say here at the outset that I think in this decade and rather than in this century, these are the only two countries which have comprehensively defeated terrorism in all that is happening around the world. You see the Middle Eastern countries, you see Afghanistan, you see all over in the region. It has been Sri Lanka, which is a success story as far as counter-terrorism is concerned, and it's Pakistan, which is a success story as far as counter-terrorism is concerned. So I think there is so much in common, a lot of experiences amongst ourselves that we've been sharing, a lot of support that we've been rendering to each other. So I think that brings us closer, not only in the security aspect, but in other aspects also. And then we, being part of the same region, I think we share so much in common that we can build upon.
You have a military background, and as a young military officer, Sri Lanka's current president, His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa, has visited Pakistan for professional courses, and there is a massive build-up of relationship in terms of military to military in Sri Lanka. But before we talk about military aspects, I'd like to talk about trade between Sri Lanka and Pakistan. This is a big question.
Yes.
Whose trade? I mean, how do we look at mutually beneficial trade? In year 2009, bilateral trade was just over $320 million, but there is a massive scope for this, and I think the High Commission itself, along with the trade departments of Sri Lanka's foreign ministry, is working to enhance trade. But what is the scope at present?
I think when I came here, despite of the fact that I have a military background, but and I also knew that on the military side, the two militaries are very, very closely connected to each other and are really at the peak of its relationship. So therefore I focused myself totally right from the last 5 months or so on the trade, the mutual trade, the bilateral trade between the two countries. And I had a number of meetings with the Export Development Board people and the relevant agencies, along with my trade attaché. So if I can go a little bit into the background, before we signed the Sri Lanka-Pakistan Free Trade Agreement back in 2005, Pakistan was exporting about $100 million worth to Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka was exporting about $45 to $46 million export to Pakistan. After the free trade agreement, the Pakistan's exports to Sri Lanka rose to 369, in the last year. and Sri Lanka's export to Pakistan rose to about $100 million. But that's not enough. The capacity that the two countries has mutually, bilaterally, is about $2 billion worth of capacity that we have, that we can trade amongst ourselves. And that is where we are going to be really hitting at. We are prioritizing, our meetings are really focused on that. So I'm sure that with the passage of time, since we have the facility of the free trade agreement amongst ourselves, we are trying to go around, we are trying to sort of resolve the non-tariff barriers that we have on both sides of the of the two sides. So there are non-tariff barriers which, as I said, we need to address, and when we address those, I don't see any reason why the trade between Pakistan and Sri Lanka should not go to the target that we have. That is where we are going, and we will do our best with our Sri Lankan counterparts.
If I may ask you, High Commissioner, about the barriers to enhancing trade between the two nations. You spoke about non-tariff barriers, but what are the real challenges approaching an enhanced trade relationship between the two nations?
Pakistan has, by virtue of its size, by virtue of its population, has got bigger capacity to export to Sri Lanka. So that is why the balance of trade will always be in favor of Pakistan. But there is, what I'm saying is that when we were children, we used to be hearing and always talking of the Ceylon tea, and it's so unfortunate that Sri Lanka has lost that tea market to Kenya, in Pakistan. In Pakistan, let me tell you that everybody from top to bottom is a very heavy consumption of tea. So we were also discussing this with our colleagues in the relevant departments as to how we can assist Sri Lanka in reclaiming that that space that it had historically, and it has lost to Kenya.
What has Kenya done different to Ceylon tea?
Actually, the Kenyan, it's also a matter of taste. The Sri Lankan tea, why it has lost the Pakistani market was primarily because of the price differential. Because, as I said, tea is being consumed by everybody in Pakistan, so the lower strata of people also consume tea. So if the tea is not, the prices are not compatible.
So premium price for Ceylon tea is not.
Yes, the price is not compatible to what the Kenyan are offering tea. And then I may also say that the Sri Lankan tea is more pure. It is more strong as compared to the Kenyan tea, which is perhaps being mixed, but fortunately or unfortunately, the Pakistani people have developed that taste to the Kenyan tea. You have to have a taste for certain things, so they have developed their taste for that Kenyan tea, and that is why it is going to be slightly tough for the Sri Lankan tea exporters to market their product. Besides looking at the the price differential between the two countries. So there are we were talking of the non-tariff barriers. There are issues related to the shipments, there are issues related to the air travels, there are issues related to cargoes, there are issues related to certain non-tariff tax levies that are being imposed, because of which the product does not become really palatable. Is this
common to both nations, or is it, High Commissioner?
I think it is I think it is somewhat common to the certain products of both countries. When it is to certain products here, it is to certain products in Pakistan as well. So I think we can, I don't see any reason why can't we find answers to those questions to improve our bilateral trade according to the capacity that we both have.
Wonderful. I think there is one more question I'd like to ask you before we move into a brief commercial break. Military, there's a massive accusation in Sri Lanka that in present times state institutions are being militarized with the appointment of military past military officials, former military officials to key positions in government and state institutions. But given the way Pakistan works, given your background too, I'd like to have your observation here as a key neighboring country.
Well, I hope I'm not biased towards the military, because I'm also a military man. But I know for one thing that since we belong to a very organized institution, I know the Sri Lankan military as well. So therefore, anybody from the military who is employed on a particular task will always approach the issue or the problem in a very organized and a very methodical manner as compared to our other colleagues in the bureaucracy perhaps. That is for one thing. Then I don't see any reason, because The little bit of my experience that goes here, that I know of the various departments in Sri Lanka, I don't think, and I think yesterday the Defense Secretary was talking about this, that out of all the secretaries level people, he is the only one perhaps who is a military background secretary, and out of number of, I think, over 20 high commissioners and ambassadors sent across, only one, and the one who has gone to Pakistan, high commissioner who has gone to Pakistan, the admiral. There is hardly anybody else visible in the from the military in the government. So while I don't see anything wrong, I think, in employing the military people because of their experiences, because of their organizational strength, I think it will always do well for the country. But of course, it is up to the leadership how do they decide and how best they employ the resources, the human resource that is available at their disposal. With the president, I think he has had a long experience as a defense secretary. From 2005 till 2015, I think he remained the defense secretary of the country, and I think he very well understands now as a president of the country what is good for the country. So I don't see any reason, I don't see any weight, in fact, in that argument that only the military people are being employed and the others are being sidelined. I don't see any reason in that.
Right. On that note, I think it's time we take a short break at Hyde Park. We'll return to talk more about Sri Lanka-Pakistan ties and how we move forward as two close neighboring countries to forge newer ties after this break. Welcome back. High Commissioner, moving on to more regional, our regional ties and the way the region works. Security is a big question, be it the SAARC or the Indian Ocean region when we talk about security. But again, Pakistan plays a key role. Sri Lanka is at a very strategic location. I'd like your observations in moving forward, how SAARC can work together here, because there are common questions about how strong SAARC is in addressing these, especially that kind of inter-relationships between SAARC regions, India, Pakistan, the question of bilateral relations between India and Pakistan. If you may address these concerns.
Well, it is very unfortunate that SAARC that came into being in 1985 has tremendous potential of delivering to the teeming millions of this region, poor people of this region. It has not taken off because of, unfortunately, the bilateral relationship between the two countries, but more so of a bit of hegemonic sort of designs, hegemonic sort of attitude between by one bigger country with the rest of the countries, that it has not really taken off true to its potential that it has. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't, because we have a lot of, unfortunately, ever since 2016 when SAARC summit was planned in Islamabad, that has not materialized till to date, because it was planned in Islamabad and therefore India persuaded other countries not to participate, and therefore there is no sort of summit level meeting taking place since 2016. And if I may also expand this a little bit towards BIMSTEC, a lot talked about BIMSTEC, which supposedly was created in 1997 because as a sort of as a replacement of SAARC, because it was thought that perhaps Pakistan or India-Pakistan relations are not letting SAARC function. So therefore BIMSTEC was created in 1997. Let me say that as of today, while SAARC's trade, intra-region trade is 5%, BIMSTEC also in the last 23 years has not gone beyond 6%, whereas SAARC has a proper institutional headquarter at Nepal, Kathmandu, and it has the requisite infrastructure, the requisite human resource staff. BIMSTEC has not developed that type of infrastructure as in the last 23 years. And by the way, India's own trade, because BIMSTEC was a brainchild of India, because it wanted to sort of bypass SAARC, its own trade with BIMSTEC is not more than 5%. with the BIMSTEC countries. It has really not find itself as a replacement of SAARC. So the answer is not. The answer is not in creating yet another. And BIMSTEC is not, by the way, an intra-regional organization. It is an inter-regional organization because it has got Thailand also as a part of it. So the point is that while the idea and why Pakistan has been isolated from BIMSTEC, why Afghanistan has been isolated from BIMSTEC, they are not part of them. Two very populous countries have not been part of it. So if the intent was really to support and help these regional countries and their economies and their millions of poor people, it should have delivered. It has not delivered. So I see no reason why SAARC should not. We have other issues. Yes, besides India and Pakistan issues, we have other issues because of which SAARC is not taking off. Those issues are related to infrastructure development. Those issues are related to border crossing issues. Those issues are related to as I said, the other shipment and cargo related, air travel related, the border frictions. So when those all issues are contributing actually to sort of a reduced intra-regional trade. Besides, of course, the predominant thing is the relationship between India and Pakistan, and within that, the hegemonic sort of attitude that the big country is displaying in the region, because of which SAARC is not really taking off to its potential.
Do you mean, since Pakistan is not a part of BIMSTEC, that there won't be any traction gained as a result, or that SAARC will actually play a bigger role if these international issues, if the regional issues are ironed out between the countries?
What I put a comparison in front of you. If BIMSTEC was designed to address the issues that were not addressed by SAARC, what BIMSTEC has done in 23 years? It has not been able to hold a summit. In 23 years they have had only 4 summits. In 23 years they have had only 4 summits. Why the trade between them has not expanded? Now Pakistan is not part of BIMSTEC, so what is the hurdle? What is the obstacle? Because in SAARC, Pakistan was made a scapegoat that Pakistan is not letting the SAARC countries develop amongst themselves. So it's not. It's the attitude of one country to dominate the others, because there also, if there was any sincerity on the part of the bigger country, if there was any sincerity on the part of that country, BIMSTEC should have taken off like anything. It hasn't. So therefore, there is more potential in SAARC as compared to BIMSTEC, as I would say. Because, as I said, SAARC is a better organized, better institutionalized, better staffed, better funded organization. The only thing is that we have to start treating each other at an even platform, deal with each other at even platform, and also try to at the same time resolve our issues bilaterally, so that these do not become an obstacle in the way of the economic progression of the region.
Talking about the Kashmir issue, Pakistan has been with Sri Lanka at international fora during UNHRC, during Sri Lanka's ongoing tussle between Geneva and human rights allegations. But the Sri Lankan government said the country's issue to be resolved, as in Pakistan and India's issue, is up to the two nations. Did Pakistan expect a somewhat different approach or reaction from Sri Lanka?
We fully understand Sri Lanka's position. We fully understand Sri Lanka's historical linkages with India. We fully understand the geographic proximity of the two countries. We fully understand the dependence of the two countries, especially Sri Lanka's dependence on or historical trade between India and Sri Lanka. We fully understand that, but there is. India never proceeded on the issue bilaterally as well. So when there are other countries raising their voices on the resolution of the issues, on the moral grounds, on political grounds, we expect there to have a voice coming out of Sri Lanka. But as I said, that we fully understand the position of Sri Lanka, and we are proceeding well with the government of Sri Lanka. But on moral grounds, whatever that is happening, I think it will be appreciated if a voice is raised in favor of the resolution of the issue.
What is the current status of the resolution of this issue? Because it is a regional question, especially when we talk about security of the region. You as a securities expert too, I think you'll have an independent voice here. other than from Pakistan?
You know, this is a very loaded sort of a question. It has a history, and I don't need to go into the history, but just giving you a few marks. India took it to Security Council in 1948. There were resolutions in 48. There was a resolution in 1949. There was a resolution in 1951, during which India agreed that it has to be as per the UN resolution resolved. Then after the Simla agreement in 1972, then it went into bilateralism. India first reigned from the UN resolution, then it reigned from the bilateralism after the UN, then it started taking unilateral actions. You are aware of the fact that now the unilateral action that they have started, what situation it has brought into not only the region but internally also in India. The abolition of 370, the abolition of 35, abrogation of 35A, and the Citizenship Amendment Act, the National Registration of Citizens Act, then the Domicile Act, all these designed to demographically change Kashmir's demography, and by disenfranchising, disempowering those people. It is not, how can you say that this is a bilateral issue? How can you say the world is raising its voices? The Kashmiri people have 100,000 people since 1989. 100,000 people have lost their lives. Over 100,000 women have got widowed. Over 100,000 children have got orphaned. There are 7,000 people out of these 100,000 who were killed. They were killed in custody. There is so much to it. Now after the 5th of August, the August, almost now a year completing, 8 million people are under complete lockdown. The basic facilities are not available to them. There is no medicine, there is no food, there is no communication. They cannot interact with the rest of the world. And then you see the world have started raising voice. There are voices from the UN Congress, there are voices from the European Parliament, there are voices from the British parliamentary groups, there are voices from the human rights organizations, the UN Human Rights Organization, there are voices from the OIC, there are voices from the independent think tanks, there are voices from independent NGOs. All over, these people are raising voices and concerns about the hounding and the targeting of the independent voices. The human rights defenders are now being silenced. They are being harassed. They are being tortured. They are being arrested without before even committing a crime. Those people are being targeted. How come? Now let me also tell you that it's not only 200 million Muslims in India today are unsure about their lives, because of the Citizenship Amendment Act, because of the the NRC. 200 million people. The Muslim population of India has been tremendously contributing towards its economy. Just look at the Bollywood alone. There are how many Muslims are contributing to. So that is the contribution of those people to their own country. So I think by saying this thing, you cannot evade a responsibility that you owe to the people of Kashmir, that you owe to the security of the region. I think there is not only that, these are certain things that has happened with regards to the Muslims. Let me tell you, only 3 days back, on the 13th of June, in Tamil Nadu, not too far from here, there was a Christian church that was put ablaze. Okay, and then only in the first quarter of this 2020, 49 churches have been put ablaze in India, and there is a constant harassment of all minorities. So if the West is looking at India or the 1.3 billion market, or the West preparing perhaps India for confronting China in the future, well, I can tell them that it is happening at the cost and at the blood of the minorities within that country. So when you combine this whole thing, whether with Kashmir and with the rest of the thing that is happening, just look at what's happening on the China-India line of actual control today. It is as a consequence of what India has been doing to Article 370 and 35A, because China did not accept that, and that is how it has led to this. So the domestic political actions by India are creating, I think, a lot more difficulties for regional security.
So I'd like to talk a little more about the West and China's involvement in the region after this short break. Welcome back. High Commissioner, you were talking about the West and its treatment of certain nations in terms of how India is looked at and how Pakistan is treated. Sri Lanka has had similar challenges dealing with the West, dealing with the United Nations Human Rights Commission, specifically for which, as I mentioned earlier, Pakistan has contributed at large positively to help Sri Lanka's cause. But are you saying that unless the West takes a different approach, these issues will not be able to be resolved?
Okay, before I just come on to this question, let me, as a continuation of the previous question, in terms of the security in South Asia, because without talking about Afghanistan, it won't be complete. Pakistan has ever since 9/11, Pakistan got into this problem, not of its own, for supporting the West. Pakistan, got into this issue, and it had a segment of its own society had picked up arms against its own people and its own armed forces and its own security apparatus. And because of that, for the last about 17 years, Pakistan has lost about 60 to 70,000 of its citizens, of its people, about 100 billion of loss in terms of economic losses. This Pakistan has lost. Pakistan has done so much in terms of bringing back peace to Afghanistan, as against the propaganda that has been, launched by a couple of countries. Pakistan has done every peace initiative that was, launched about Afghanistan. Pakistan, was a part of it. Whether it was led by United States, whether it was led by Russia, whether it was led by China, Pakistan was a part of it. Even very recently, the American special envoy was there in Pakistan, and he praised Pakistan's role. Let me say that even there, India has not been able to play a very positive role in Afghanistan to bring back. And let me also tell you, I have the things on me. I can give it to you to read. Even today, there are Indian citizens fighting side by side the ISIS in Afghanistan. Their families were captured by the Afghan forces, and they are now in the custody of the Afghan people. Asim Omar, who was the subcontinental Al-Qaeda chief, was killed last year by the American as well as the Afghan forces in Helmand province, was an Indian citizen. He was not a Pakistani citizen. And Pakistan did not pick up these people from India and took them to Afghanistan to fight there, besides ISIS fighting the international community as well as the Afghan forces. Coming on to your question. The point is that when I spoke of the treatment of minorities in India right now, Christians as well as Muslims, and I talked about the churches that were torched. I have plenty of data, and mind you, the articles that I am referring to with regards to India's participation, Indians' participation in Afghanistan besides ISIS, are written by Indian authors, not by anybody else. So those articles are here. I can leave those with you to read. So the point is that if all these were done or had happened in Sri Lanka or in Pakistan, what would have been the West saying by now, by the way? What would have been their stance? Now they are talking about human rights violations in Sri Lanka as a part of the war that was fought here by concluding the LTTE war. Why they are not raising their voices now? Why they are having different standards? So what I am saying is that if you are looking at that 1.3 billion market, or you are looking at some country to fight for you against China, that's not going to happen. But if it is happening at the cost and at the blood of the people of other minorities. So therefore, the standards for you perhaps and us may be different, and the standard for India at this point in time is different because of the priorities that we have just spelled out. So I think the earlier the West realizes that they start treating these countries evenly, and they start responding on moral grounds to these issues, I think till then things coming back to normalcy would be difficult.
Talking about terrorism, counter-terrorism efforts of the region are key as we talk about security. Sri Lanka faced the brutality of extremists on Easter Sunday last year. But again, Sri Lanka seeks a lot of assistance from Pakistan too in dealing with the extremists and the kind of radical groups spreading across the region. This is a massive threat to the region as ISIS and its caliphates have moved and have stationed in this part of the region.
Yes.
How do we look at this jointly?
Absolutely. It's a very good question, and Let me break this to you because there have been, when the Easter Sunday is talked about, there have been a lot said about the information provided to Sri Lanka about 15 days before by India. Let me say this to you, that it was in April. It was in April that year when we shared information, and I think the Defense Secretary has also referred to this in his interview yesterday. We shared information with the right people here that this is something happening, something is developing, something is cooking, an intelligence operation. No information is useless. Every information, every piece of information is very important. So the operators will have to really follow through that information that is available. Now if the operators or the right people dealing with it sit over it or just put it on a side, Sunday Easter takes place. So therefore I think we have been very forthcoming in this regard with the Sri Lankan government and the Sri Lankan institutions. And as I said, the proof is, I can give that proof, that we shared the information about the preparation for the Easter Sunday back in April. And then if no action was taken, that wasn't Pakistan's fault. So the point is that we are thoroughly on board, and the two countries, as I said, have since decades cooperated, supported, trained. I have the complete data. Over 6,000 Sri Lankan officers have got trained in Pakistan. And there is so much that we are having in common that it is absolutely indispensable for the two countries not to cooperate on these issues. And Pakistan remains committed to to Sri Lanka, especially in the extremism and the extremist test. Who would understand it more than Pakistan, who has suffered for the last about 17-18 years at the hands of the extremists? As I said, 60 to 70,000 people lost.
How do you respond to allegations that Pakistan in certain areas provides a breeding ground to these extremists?
The point is that we had a certain area in Pakistan when this 9/11 took place, which had a different set of rules historically. It had a different set of laws in that, and therefore it was you can say a sort of a loose area, and therefore it was also close to Afghanistan. And when fighting started taking place there, the movement of these people started taking place because the government was not really having that type of an effective control over that area as the rest of the country. So over a period of time, that area has been reclaimed from the breeding ground that people were talking about. We cleared those breeding grounds, and they are no longer a breeding ground. There are no safe havens, no longer safe havens in Pakistan. There are no longer any no-go areas in Pakistan, and there are no terrorist acts nowadays. Very seldom. In Pakistan. Why? Because there are no places as such which can house or which can be a safe haven for these terrorists. So I think Pakistan has traveled a long distance with a lot of sacrifices of its people. It's no longer, this argument is no longer find any traction, frankly speaking, unless somebody is looking at it from a very biased perspective and or exploiting something against Pakistan. I think Pakistan has traveled a long way with a lot of sacrifices, and so has Sri Lanka. So I think and it is not in our interest, by the way, to be providing safe havens or to be supporting such type of elements, because they have been fighting against us in our own country. So why should we be supporting such type of elements?
But at the same time, Sri Lanka too was experiencing a peaceful environment almost 10 years since the end of conflict, defeat of terrorism, but terrorism struck Sri Lanka 10 years on too. It is no secret as we speak that Sri Lanka disregarded information, security information and intelligence information. You spoke of Pakistan sharing information in April, prior to the April 21st attacks in 2019. What was the nature of this information?
It was some sort of, intercepts, some sort of movement of people, because they are at the grand scale. You are chasing these people. You are trying to sort of connect the linkages of the way people are talking from the Middle East and everywhere. So I think as a part of our own work, we were we monitor such type of things. So therefore, when the movement was taking place, some people related to ISIS, etc. towards Sri Lanka, we thought that it is better to be sharing it with our counterparts here, and that is how those was shared.
How did Pakistan react to the situation in Sri Lanka, provided that Pakistan had shared information and also of the allegations that propped up later on?
Well, the point is that Pakistan, after having shared the information and having done its job, naturally left it to the Sri Lankan government and the Sri Lankan authorities to pursue or follow up that, and naturally Pakistan didn't follow that up after that, because it was once shared the information with the right people, then you are out of it, then, because it's a sovereign country, it's an independent country. So therefore we didn't follow up, I think, thereafter, but we did share as a friendly country whatever that was available to us at that point in time, which should have been pursued. And I think this issue could have been, or this unfortunate incident could have been avoided.
This kind of negligence, disregard, disrespect rather to intelligence information that is already available, and a weakening of the security apparatus of a strategic location as Sri Lanka could lead to repercussions in the region. Was Pakistan concerned of that too? I'm asking you from the point of view as an expert of security.
Yes, one would always wish to, as I said, that these are two independent countries interacting with each other, but one would always wish to, the right people to pay heed to such type of information. As the lesson that one can really draw from this is that, as I said in the beginning also, that no information related to, terrorist acts, or for that matter anything, intelligence information, is useless. So the lesson is that the right institutions, the right people needs to follow through all the information that is available, especially related to terrorism, because it should not be taken light, because it has far-reaching consequences.
Thank you very much. We'll take a short break now before we come into the final segment of our discussion. Welcome back. We were talking about Pakistan's role in ensuring regional security, especially with surrounding the Easter Sunday attacks, that Pakistan was able to provide sensitive intelligence information to Sri Lanka even before India handed this information. But let's talk a little about China and the regional power play. Infrastructure development, China plays a massive role in terms of funding these, not just in Sri Lanka but also Pakistan. But there are questions of security, of China's involvement. In a recent discussion with journalists, the US envoy in Sri Lanka said that infrastructure-led development would not be viable at this stage, and vouched more for private sector investments. But at this stage, how do you look at China's involvement and countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka moving ahead in obtaining these funding and support?
I think it is the leadership of the country, whether it is Pakistan's leadership or Sri Lanka's leadership, which owes a responsibility to its people to protect the interests of its people and in the sovereignty of its country. And I see no reason why, why the leadership of Pakistan and Sri Lanka would not be taking these things into account by protecting the interests of its own people, its own country, and its own sovereignty. So that having said that, I would like to talk of the Chinese involvement in Sri Lanka, especially. There is the port has been developed. People are saying that these infrastructures are not required, as you was just talking about. It may not be required today, but in the longer run, as the developments are taking place, Gwadar is being built in Pakistan. The road communication infrastructure is being built. The train communication infrastructure is being built. And so will be, towards Sri Lanka, Hambantota, and a lot other infrastructural projects that is being undertaken with the help of Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, let me say that Sri Lanka-China trade has tremendously improved. Even Sri Lanka is exporting to China. It's not that only China is exporting to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, yes, of course, the trade volume and the trade deficit is always in favor of the bigger country. So is in case of India as well. When you are trading with India, you are importing more from them. So the point is, and then so far, I think China has been able to invest about $12 billion in Sri Lanka. And it has about $5 billion of trade with Sri Lanka, and out of these $5 billion, about $600 to $700 million trade is export from Sri Lanka to China. out of the people are talking of the the debt trap and impinging on the sovereignty of a country. Now, I think out of the $15 billion of sort of debt that Sri Lanka overall has, it has only about $4.5 billion to China. So it's not that the whole debt is being owned to China, and therefore China will make Sri Lanka a sort of a hostage country or a sort of a subservient country. So I don't think so. I think the leadership is playing very well, and I don't see beyond mere politico-strategic rivalry in such type of rhetorics that is every now and then one hears. I think Sri Lanka-China relation is developing very well, and so is Pakistan-China relation developing very well. We have mutual interests, we have common interests, we require China's support, and I think China is in a better position as of today to support both our countries with very less strings attached. Even with the MCC, there's a millennium, some sort of an agreement between China and between US and Sri Lanka, which is not being accepted by the government of Sri Lanka because it has certain strings attached which the government is not accepting. So the point is that the government will always see the strings attached to a support, a help, or sort of a loan. So I think it may be just sort of over exaggerating China's involvement in Sri Lanka by sort of subjugating or whatever one can say Sri Lanka. I don't see it. It has other politico-strategic reasons by virtue of, fortunately or unfortunately, by virtue of Sri Lanka's location. So I think Sri Lanka's options have enhanced, because its options, there is now India also working here, there is China also working here, the US also wants to work here. Previously it was only India which was working in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka remained, in what state of affair at that point in time vis-a-vis the LTTE also. It is part of history. So I think now Sri Lanka is in a much better position to play its cards well, and I have no reason to believe, and I see that the leadership is playing its cards very well.
It was a historic moment for Sri Lanka-Pakistan relations when last year Sri Lanka cricket toured Pakistan and was received there. There must be renewed interest in developing the relationship, especially in the sporting arena. I
think Pakistan will always remain indebted and grateful to Sri Lanka for this gesture. And not only the Pakistan sports community, even the Pakistani people are highly grateful for this gesture by the Sri Lankan sports community as well as the Sri Lankan government and Sri Lankan people, because it has been a catalyst of towards reviving of cricket in Pakistan. Sri Lanka was followed on its heels by Bangladesh, and then we had the PSL, and then other countries also considering the options of coming back to Pakistan because of the normalcy returning. But of course, it was because of Sri Lanka's initiative and support that has created a lot of goodwill, a lot of love, and a lot of affection between the two countries and the two people.
I think I wish I could have spoken more about the new normal, how Pakistan is facing, but Pakistan has faced this pandemic with a lot of courage and exemplary outcome in how the pandemic has been managed. But I think that's all the time we have on this show, High Commissioner. Thank you very much for your time, and we were indeed honored to host you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
We had with us Major General Muhammed Saad Khattak, the Pakistani High Commissioner in Sri Lanka, joining us tonight at Hyde Park. Thank you for watching. Good night.